Phil Collins now has gone from being one of the most reviled musicians, songwriters, to actually being the pillar of like modern culture, or whatever it is they say,
'Cause it's another day for you in paradise.
All right, so picture this. It's the year 2025, and suddenly, out of nowhere, Phil Collins is trending again. Yep, that Phil Collins, the guy your parents probably slow danced to in the 80s, and maybe even the same guy your cool uncle insists is one of the best drummers of all time. But here's the twist. His comeback isn't just about nostalgia or some viral TikTok soundbite. Phil Collins is being rediscovered, and not just as the dude behind In the Air Tonight, but as a legit drumming icon whose influence runs deeper than anyone expected. The guy who once dominated charts with emotional ballads and stadium anthems is now being embraced by a whole new generation. And get this, they're finding his music without the baggage of 80s cheesiness or pop overexposure. It's like they stumbled upon a musical time capsule and realized, wait a second, this guy can actually play. Collins isn't just a pop star, he's a drummer's drummer. The kind of artist who geeks out over snare tones and cymbal swells. What makes this rediscovery even juicier is that he never really chased the spotlight. In fact, he's always said he felt more at home behind the drum kit than in front of the mic. And now, after years of being side-eyed by music snobs, he's finally getting the flowers he deserves. So, whether you're a longtime fan or new to the hype, buckle up, because Phil's rhythm is back, and this time, the world's actually listening. Ringo Starr, the Beatle who beat the odds. Phil Collins' unlikely drumming hero. Okay, so let's spill some serious tea about Phil Collins' first drum crush. None other than Ringo Starr. Yeah, you heard that right. Of all the drummers in the galaxy, Phil kicks off his list of personal legends with the so-called least talented Beatle. But here's the thing. Phil doesn't just like Ringo, he worships him. And not in a casual, oh, he was in the Beatles way. We're talking full-blown, childhood idol-level admiration. Back when little Phil was banging on Tupperware lids and dreaming of rock stardom, he wasn't listening to guitar solos or screaming fans. He was laser-focused on the drums. And Ringo, with his chill vibe and left-handed style on a right-handed kit, became his rhythmic North Star. While the rest of the world was fawning over Lennon's lyrics or McCartney's melodies, Phil was geeking out over the drum fills on Strawberry Fields Forever and Rain. What's wild is that Ringo got dragged hard back in the 70s. Some jazz snobs even claimed he couldn't play. But Phil? Phil was having none of it. He saw what many missed, that Ringo wasn't flashy because he didn't need to be. He was the glue holding those iconic tracks together, building emotional texture without stealing the spotlight. And honestly, doesn't that sound exactly like the kind of drummer Phil Collins would grow up to be? Respectful, precise, and always serving the song. So next time someone rolls their eyes at Ringo, just remember, Phil Collins sees a genius where others saw just a Beatle. Keith Moon, the Chaos King who made drumming an explosion. Phil Collins' wild inspiration. Now let's talk about the absolute madman who crashes into Chapter 2 of Phil Collins' list of favorite drummers, Keith Moon of The Who. And listen, calling Keith Moon wild is like calling lava kinda warm. This guy didn't just play drums, he detonated them. Imagine showing up to a gig with your headphones taped to your head and your entire body practically vibrating with energy. And that's just sound check. For Phil Collins, watching Keith Moon play live was like watching nature go off script. He wasn't keeping time. He was bending it, breaking it, maybe even lighting it on fire. Keith didn't care about structure or predictability. He cared about feeling. His drumming was unpredictable, ferocious, and totally out of pocket in the best way possible. And Phil? Oh, he was hooked. Because for a guy who's known for his technical chops and meticulous timing, Moon represented pure, glorious chaos. What makes this love even more fascinating is that Phil wasn't drawn to Moon's antics. You know, blowing up toilets and driving Rolls-Royces into pools. Nope, he admired the madness in the music itself. Keith was the only drummer who could make an entire song feel like a drum solo without ever being obnoxious about it. In a world of clean fills and perfect syncopation, Moon showed Collins that sometimes it's okay to be loud, messy, and just a little bit unhinged, if it comes from the heart. And that, friends, is why Keith Moon didn't just break the rules. He rewrote them. John Bonham, the drumming thunderstorm that shaped Phil Collins's powerhouse style. Okay, let's crank up the volume, because Chapter 3 is all about the human earthquake behind Led Zeppelin. The one and only John Bonham. And if you think Phil Collins only admired drummers who were soft and subtle, think again. Bonham didn't play the drums. He punched the universe with them. And Phil? He felt every hit, like a cosmic wake-up call. Now, here's the juicy part. Phil Collins has never been shy about saying that John Bonham completely redefined what it meant to play rock drums. This wasn't finesse disguised as noise. This was precision and brute force in perfect harmony. Collins often talks about Bonham's bass drum like it was a character in its own right. Bold, booming, and so sharp it could cut through granite. Songs like When the Levee Breaks weren't just music. They were sonic avalanches. And guess what? That track was recorded in a stairwell. Yes, a stairwell. Because even Bonham's Echo had more attitude than most full drum kits. Phil didn't just admire Bonham's power, though. He respected the balance. The way he could go from thunderous fills to tight, funky grooves with surgical precision. Collins took that duality and ran with it, especially in his early Genesis years, where his drums weren't just keeping time, they were telling stories. So, if Ringo Starr was Phil's introduction and Keith Moon was his wild side, then John Bonham was the blueprint for epic intensity. The guy who proved drums could be emotional, physical, and iconic, all at once. Buddy Rich, the jazz wizard who made Phil Collins believe in drumming magic. All right, if chapters 1 through 3 were about groove, chaos, and raw power, Chapter 4 takes a sharp left into jazz heaven, because now we're talking about Buddy Rich, the man who played drums so fast, it's a wonder his sticks didn't catch fire. This wasn't just another name on Phil Collins's list. No, Buddy Rich was the gold standard, the drummer you worship when you realize drumming isn't just music, it's wizardry. Phil Collins grew up with his ears tuned to more than just rock and roll. Long before he was lighting up arenas with Genesis, he was spinning big band records and being completely hypnotized by Rich's precision and flair. Rich didn't just play fast, he played clean, with such control that every note felt like it had been laser engraved into the air. One of Phil's favorite Buddy moments? That insane West Side Story medley. Seriously, it's not just a drum solo. It's a full-on Broadway battle scene, and Buddy wins every time. But here's where it gets deep. Phil wasn't just watching in awe. He was taking notes. Years later, when Collins launched his own big band in the 1990s, he was basically saying, "Hey, Buddy, this one's for you." Buddy Rich wasn't just fast, he was flawless. And that's the part Phil tried to carry into his own playing. It wasn't about showing off, it was about elevating drumming to high art. So yeah, if John Bonham gave Phil thunder, Buddy Rich gave him lightning wrapped in silk. Charlie Watts, the stone who stayed still while the world spun wild. Now, let's slow things down for Chapter 5, but in the coolest way possible, because we're talking about Charlie Watts, the quiet heartbeat of the Rolling Stones, and the man Phil Collins called one of his favorite drummers. And honestly, in a band full of wild rock stars doing wild rock star things, Charlie was the calm in the storm, the guy who didn't need to smash his drum kit to make a statement. His statement was restraint, and baby, he made it loud. For Phil, Watts represented elegance in a world that was constantly cranking the volume to 11. While everyone else in the Stones was turning up the chaos, Charlie stayed laser-focused on one thing: serving the song. His drumming wasn't flashy, but it felt right. That little behind-the-beat groove, that was all Watts, and Phil loved it. He saw in Charlie what many overlooked, a drummer who made simplicity sound sophisticated, like a jazz cat who wandered into a rock band and decided to stay cool anyway. What's even sweeter is that Phil and Charlie became friends later in life. That's right, rock royalty bonding over snare tones and subtle cymbal work. Phil respected how Charlie never let ego mess with the music. For a guy like Collins, who spent decades balancing between frontman fame and drummer roots, Watts was proof that being understated didn't mean being unseen. It meant being essential. So while others thrashed, exploded, and strutted, Charlie just played. Steady, smooth, timeless. And that, my friends, was more than enough to earn Phil's lifelong respect. Nick Collins, the drummer who inherited the sticks and the spotlight. All right, so this chapter? It hits different, emotionally and rhythmically. Because Chapter 6 isn't about a famous legend from the 60s or 70s, it's about Phil Collins's own son, Nick Collins. And let's be real, stepping into the shoes of one of the most iconic drummers of all time? That's not pressure. That's a full-on snare-crushing, hi-hat sizzling, soul-sweating challenge. But here's the twist. Nick absolutely crushed it. As Phil's health started to decline, the question wasn't if he could still perform, it was how. And the answer came in the form of his son taking the throne behind the drum kit. Picture this. You grow up watching your dad play some of the most recognizable drum fills in music history, and then one day, you're playing those exact fills on stage while he sings just a few feet away. Talk about full circle. But this wasn't some sweet but sentimental gesture. Nick wasn't just playing like Phil, he was playing with the spirit of Phil, blending youthful energy with jaw-dropping precision. Fans noticed, critics noticed, and most importantly, Phil noticed. Watching his son carry on the rhythmic legacy was, in his words, both bittersweet and incredibly fulfilling. So yeah, in a story full of rock legends and jazz gods, Chapter 6 is the most personal beat of them all. The moment when the rhythm passed from one generation to the next. Not just music history, family history in motion. The final beat. How Phil Collins's drumming heroes shaped a legend and left a legacy. And just like that, we've reached the grand finale. The last crash of the cymbal, the final fade of the snare roll. But before we pack up the drum kit and roll credits, let's take a moment to soak in what this entire journey has really been about. Phil Collins didn't just list his favorite drummers, he shared his DNA. Each name wasn't just an influence, it was a building block, shaping the way he plays, performs, and perceives the very essence of rhythm. From Ringo's understated genius, to Keith Moon's beautiful chaos, to Bonham's thunderous swagger, Phil took the best of each and built a style that was uniquely his own. Then came the elegance of Buddy Rich, the cool control of Charlie Watts, the emotional legacy of Nick Collins, and the technical brilliance of collaborators like Chester Thompson and Steve Gadd. Each one left a fingerprint on Phil's sound. But what really makes this story shine? It's not just the beats, it's the respect. The way Phil Collins talks about these drummers is the way fans talk about their heroes, with awe, with love, and with zero ego. That's rare in any world, let alone music. So whether you're a drummer, a fan, or just someone who stumbled across this deep dive while procrastinating on laundry, remember this: Phil Collins isn't just a pop star or a drummer. He's a living, breathing tribute to the legends who came before him. And thanks to him, those legends aren't just remembered, they're felt in every beat.